This is George Dingleby interviewing Richard E. Overholser at the Wabash County Public Library on Thursday evening, June 20th, 1985. This is on the Vietnam Veterans Series. And first of all, Richard, the first question I ask you, and I'm going to ask everyone, is tell me a little bit about your family and the background, and your mother and her maiden name, and your dad, and any of the family stories and so forth.
My father's name was Walter Edward Overholser. My mother's name was Nettie Jane Howes Overholser. I was born and raised most of my life in Huntington County. We moved to Wabash County in 1960, and I graduated from Lagro High School in 1962. I've got a half-brother, two half-sisters, and three brothers younger than myself. I'm 41 years old at this time. I went from out of high school straight into the service when I was 18.
Yeah. Let me ask you, just before we get on too far, tell me a little bit about the background of your father's family and where they were from, and your mother's family and her maiden name and where they were from and so forth.
Okay. My father was born up in Elkhart County, up around Goshen area. I was born and raised up there. He has a brother and one sister. Well, the sister's still surviving, my aunt. My uncle is dead. My father and mother both deceased now. Dad died in 1981 and Mom died in 84.
What was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Howes. Her parents was Newton and Sarah Howes. Mom was
H-O-U-S-E?
No, H-O-W-E-S.
H-O-W-E-S. Okay.
Right. Mom was born in Havre, Montana. Grandpa and Grandma lived out there when they first got married and then moved back here. Mom was basically raised in Huntington County also. They lived in Andrews until her and Dad got married. My mother was my dad's second wife. They were married at 35 years old. I have to stop and think there a minute. On my mother's side, there was two brothers and herself. My one uncle on that side is still alive.
What took them out to Montana?
To be honest with you, I don't know.
Okay, you went right straight from high school into the military.
Right.
Were you drafted?
No, I volunteered.
Yes.
I went into the Army.
Okay. Why did you go into the Army, and had anybody else in the family?
My uncle on my mother's side had been in the service. And I was raised to, family, God, country. I was brought up in that kind of upbringing. My dad was 4F from World War II because he had a medical problem. He wasn't able to go, and I always felt that he felt kind of bad because he wasn't able to fulfill his obligation, so to speak. But at that time, they did have the draft and everything. I decided instead of waiting and taking whatever they give me, that at that time they had a program where you could sign up and get what you wanted if you could qualify for it. I didn't get what I wanted. I wanted to go into construction engineering, but my eyesight wasn't good enough at what they wanted for it. Consequently, I ended up going into the supply field.
Okay. What year was it that you went into the Army?
Okay, I went in on Friday, July 13th, 1962.
And where were you inducted?
I was inducted in Indianapolis, Indiana, sworn in there, and then bused down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I did my 8 weeks basic training. From there, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, where I took 8 weeks of quartermaster schooling and come out of there a general supply specialist, small weapons armor. MLS number was 76810. From there, I went to Nam. I was one of 2 fellows in a company that got orders to go to Nam. That's kind of an interesting story in itself. I never thought I'd ever realize what the runaround was. They never did come right out and tell me where I was going to begin with. I was sitting in class one day about 3 weeks before, maybe 4 weeks before I was due to graduate. They called me out of class and told me to report back to company headquarters that First Sergeant wanted to see me. So I hustled back across the post to company, and I reported to First Sergeant, and he told me to go up and get in my dress greens. This was in the fall, and I was in dress greens at that time. So I went upstairs and changed clothes, come back down. He said, just have a seat there. You get here in a few minutes. I sat there about 30 minutes, I suppose, and the phone rang. First Sergeant said, you go outside, there'll be a car here picking you up in 5 minutes. I said, a car? He says, yeah, a staff car. Now this was unheard of. I'm a private E1 recruit, they don't transport privates around. So I went outside in about 5 minutes. This car pulled up, and there was a corporal driving it, and he says, are you Private Overholser? I said, yes, sir. He says, get in the car. I get in the car, and they take me up to battalion headquarters. And he tells me to report to the sergeant. I don't remember the sergeant's name anymore in there. I went in there and reported to him. He says, oh, yes, we've been waiting on you. He says, just have a seat over there. We'll be right with you. And he gets on the phone talking to somebody, and I hear him say, we have Private Overholser here at battalion headquarters. And he said, okay, he'll be there. He'll be waiting for you. He hangs up. He says, just sit loose. There'll be somebody come get you. I looked at him finally. I said, well, what's happening? What's going on? He says, I'm sorry, I don't know. He says, all they told us was to get you up here. A few minutes later, this sergeant walks in from outside and he says, I'm here to pick up Private Overholser. He says, yep, that's him right there. They took me to post headquarters. They took me in there. And by this time now, I'm beginning to be worried. Something's happened at home. What? They take me in there and they said, and set me in this little office, smaller than this yet. And they said, there'll be somebody in here with you in a few minutes. About 30 minutes later, this whack lieutenant walks in. He said, you're Private Richard E. Overholser, RA 16736-886? I said, yes, ma'am. He says, can I call you Richard? I says, well, you can call me Dick if you'd like. That's what I go by. He says, well, Dick, we got your orders. We are going to take you up to Washington, D.C., to the passport office. You're going to go up there and get a passport. She says it's going to cost you $5. Well, this is the middle of the month. I mean, no GI has money in the middle of the month. I said, well, I ain't got the $5. She says, don't worry about that. We'll give you the $5. She says, and she hands me a stack of forms like this, about a half-inch thick. She says, you need to fill these out. And I start going down through, and it wants to know everything about my family history. I couldn't answer them. I went back 5 generations, I think. And I looked at her and I said, well, what is all this about? I says, now, I've been sitting around waiting for almost an hour and a half, and nobody's told me nothing. I says, what is all this passport, everything else? Passport, I assumed I was going overseas. I didn't. And she said, well, we got orders. You're going to Vietnam. And I looked at her incredulously because I'd never even heard of Vietnam. And I said, Vietnam, where's Vietnam? And she looked back at me. She said, I don't know. I says, you're telling me I'm going someplace and you don't know where? She says, you're one of the first ones I've ever seen that was going over there here from this area. I said, okay. So they run me down, all the way down to Washington, D.C., which is about a 2.5-hour drive. Drove me all the way down there. I got my passport thing all done and picture taken and everything. They brought me back. Took me back to the same lady. And she had a bunch of paperwork there, and she says, now this is your shot immunization record. You have to go over it today. We got to start some of these shots today because you got a series of them to take before you leave. She says, you get to go home for 2 weeks as soon as you graduate, and then you'll report to Travis Air Force Base in California. We'll give you all the tickets and everything that you need. And that's how I found out I was going numb. I finally went to the post library and got an atlas out, and all they called it, according to the atlas, was Indochina. You know. But I've never heard of any other person that went over there and went through the rigmarole I did. All that paperwork was for security clearance. They had, I had a top secret crypto security clearance because of being a small weapons armor. At that time, and I was detached originally to a MAG outfit, military assistance group, when I first went over there. Well, I went over there in January of 63, first part of January 63. And
You fly over on commercial, or
yes, going over, flew over in commercial.
were there any other military on the plane with you?
No, it was mostly civilians that were going over there. And a lot of them were going over for the government. You know, they had a lot of civilian people working over there at that time. You know, construction people, stuff like this. You know, something like Peace Corps, similar to that. We laid over at Hawaii for about 2 hours. Took off long enough to refuel, and then we went to land at Clark Air Force Base, refueled, and then we went straight to Saigon. And I was in Saigon about a week, and then they sent me up to Natron. Oh, I'm sorry. Which is on the central part of the country along the coast. It was a sea resort for rich men at that time. Camaran Bay was just right down south of it, about 10, 15 miles, which is where one of the Marine bases was later on. And from there, I got there. I was myself and this other kid. Now, I never did find out where he ended up at. He went over there too. Him and I were the first two of the go over in that country from this class that we went through, that they changed to a new style of stock record keeping and everything. And they had us going around for about 90 days, TDY, to different companies. At least they had me anyway. Teaching these people how to set up the new stock system to keep track of records around. It was kind of interesting, me being a private, telling sergeants and first lieutenants and stuff how they had to do things. More or less got the big carpentry. After that, I went back to Natron, to 344th Quartermaster, or 344th Transportation Direct Support Company. It was a maintenance company for fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft. And I worked in a stock room there, the aircraft stock parts there for a while. And then they put me over on salvage specialist, where this company also went out and picked up shot down aircraft. We salvaged what we could, destroyed the remainder. One of my jobs entailed handling the classified stuff in the aircraft. That's why I had the clearance I had. that I was responsible for making sure it got out of the aircraft if it was possible.
You're talking about rocket launchers and guidance systems,
Yeah.
radio equipment, and protective
Right.
stuff that you could walk onto any open house at the air base and probably see in a Huey helicopter right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Were they using Hueys, or what were they using?
Yes, they had Hueys, they had the H-21 workhorses, they had the Otters, fixed-wing Otters, Cessnas. I'm trying to think of the other. They had a couple other choppers too. I can't think of the numbers on them, but they were real lightweight ones.
Well, what was going on in Vietnam?
At that time, as far as the Vietnamese military, we were basically training them and supporting them, you know, building their army with supplies, weaponry, or whatever. There was a lot of guerrilla activity. We had, whenever we went out on a mission, we had ARVN troops, Vietnamese troops, that were supposed to be our bodyguards.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work out that way because most of the ARVN troops were younger than I was yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that had been through about 4 or 5 weeks of training, very inadequate training at that time, you know, because we hadn't had the opportunity to really train a lot of their people in the proper aspects of training people to be a combat soldier, per se, as we had. The civilian population, I got to be around, or what little I got to be around, out in the rural areas where the peasants lived. They had no conception of what was going on at all. The only thing they could understand was that they weren't able to go out there and do what they wanted to do, farm and do it peacefully, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In the cities, now they knew what was going on. They had an idea, you know, to try and understand the full communism. There was a lot of civil problems at that time. Of course, Diem was assassinated while I was over there in November of '63, and 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, Kennedy was assassinated while I was over there. Leading up to Diem, they had the Buddhists where they would burn themselves up. I seen one of those in the Trong.
You saw a Buddhist monk set himself on fire. And what is the procedure? Was there a regular procedure they went through? Or?
Well, the other monks would all pray, and of course that monk would be sitting there praying, you know, right there, all four, knees all folded up, and he would pour the gas all over himself, and then strike a match. You know, I just, that totally blowed my mind away. I mean, to see somebody, you know, I know people commit suicide and everything else, but that's got to be the most horrible way to die in the world, is to burn to death. Mm-hmm. You know, very few people die from a fire. They usually die from smoke inhalation or whatever, but they don't actually die from burning to death. Mm-hmm. This guy did, and the monks that did that, they literally burnt to death. They didn't suffocate, they burnt to death. Mm-hmm. You know, I can even still picture it, and I can smell it. You know, when I'm talking about it, you know, it's just...
How far away were you from it?
Oh, 25, 50 feet. Mm-hmm. It just, what happened was I was on a pass, and I was going into town, and there was a Buddhist temple right there in the trunk, great big one. In fact, it was a teaching school for Buddhists. And it was right there near the corner where that was. And, of course, from where our compound was and going to town, you went right by there. And it was, I knew something was up, but I seen all the monks, Buddhist monks out there in their orange robes. Mm-hmm. You know, and of course there was a bunch of guys, there was about probably 10 or 12 of us. You never went alone, you know, because it was never, you know, it was never safe. You could get mugged or robbed just like you could in a big city. They had teenage gangs, stuff like that over there. Sicklo gangs, what we call them. Sicklo boys. And, you know, if you're by yourself, they'd try 2 or 3 of them to roll you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So you always traveled at least in pairs, if not more.
And this was early on in the...
This was around October. It was right before Diem. So he was protesting Diem's government at that point in time.
Before they assassinated.
Right. Of course, it was his own generals assassinated.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that it was their doing outside?
Well, the United States sanctioned it. The United States government sanctioned it, I'm sure, because the government was getting to a place where we couldn't deal with Diem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was getting fanatical,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the lesser of two evils at that point in time, I feel. Of course, I feel that we got sucked into that deal all the way around from clear back in the early 50s. You know, France kind of led us down the primrose path over there, I feel, you know. Or at least we thought we could solve something that they couldn't.
You know, you're unusual because I've only talked to one other person who got into Vietnam this early. And when this monk incinerated himself, was it the general feeling of yourselves and the buddies that perhaps they do not have much of a regard for life and maybe we're wasting our time here? Or what was your impression?
I don't think that, of course, those people have a different religion. You know, I never did understand the Buddhist religion to begin with.
But don't forget that South Vietnam is Catholic, also.
Yeah, but it's predominantly Buddhist.
Is it?
Yeah. There's more Buddhists than there was Catholics.
Yeah.
The only reason there was any Catholics there at all is because of the French influence. There wasn't really all that. I didn't really notice all that much French influence when I was over there, other than the Vietnamese people talk French. They could speak French as well. Some of the architecture you could tell was French. But you get out now that was in the city. You get out in the countryside. You see very little French influence. You heard very little French being spoken.
Yeah.
It was mostly Vietnamese. I don't know quite what I felt, other than I was just felt sickened that a person, you know, would feel that to protest something, they'd have to kill themselves to prove a point. You know, I can think of a lot of ways to protest something without taking my own life, you know. But they were fanatics, you know. They didn't like Diem, of course, being Buddhist, him being Catholic. You know, there was an automatic clash right there. And Diem did a lot of things that against the Buddhists. You know, there was laws, and I can't tell you what they are, but I know there was laws that restricted the Buddhists very, very heavily. They weren't supposedly allowed to protest publicly, things of this nature. He had ordered the army to raid some Buddhist temples. You know, and of course, when that happens, you know there's going to be problems.
How many ultimately incinerated themselves?
I have no idea. I know that it increased
I mean,
after
50 or something, wasn't it, before they got finished?
I think so. Like I say, I have no idea. I would have found it hard to believe. You know, I've seen pictures on TV. I've seen the pictures in life where they had pictures of monks in Saigon doing it and everything. It really don't mean that much to you to look at a picture or something. But if you've seen it firsthand, you know, like I say, the stench and the smell, I think that's what registers with you and it makes it stick with you. It was freaky to me.
It would be.
I know I went out and I got bombed out of my mind that night. Of course, I would plan on doing that anyway, but I think that little episode helped make it worth the effort. I mean, there wasn't much to do. That was the other thing about Nam, that I learned what living from one day to the next is. Because with a guerrilla activity like it was when you could be anywhere. It didn't matter where you were. If they wanted to take a pot shot at you, they'd take a pot shot at you. And a lot of times, when you was flying in an aircraft during the day, you'd look down at the rice paddies and stuff and see the farmers out there with water buffaloes, plowing the rice paddies, or doing whatever they do. Those same farmers at night would be the ones in the guerrilla bands out raiding and, taking pot shots through the compound, setting off mortars.
Were your compounds protected?
Yes. There again, by the outer perimeter was always guarded by ARVN troops, and then there was a secondary perimeter that was where at Natrong we had a Special Forces detachment. The 5th Special Forces was stationed at Natrong, and they had basically the 2nd defense, and then the rest of the compound had the next one back. One of our criteria for our company was we was over near the hospital and the petro dump. That was our responsibility in case of an attack to protect that. I don't know how you protect that from mortar rounds coming in, but regardless, that was where our perimeter was. Each company had a section of perimeter that they was responsible for. We only got called out about 3 times at Natrong, and one of those was when Kennedy was assassinated. The other was when Diem was assassinated, and then we had a rocket attack. They lobbed rockets in on us. They did try to infiltrate, but they didn't get past the Special Forces detachments.
And you were attached to Special Forces?
No, I was attached to 339th
Quartermaster.
Transportation
Okay.
Company. But
And what was that relationship with the Special Forces?
well, we the helicopters our company had flew them, to where they had to go. A lot of times, or flew supplies out to the teams if we could get to them. Most of the time, those teams went out for 2 weeks at a time. They lived off the land. They'd take it, fly them out, drop them off on LZ, and they'd be out there for 2 weeks, and then we'd meet at a destination they're supposed to be at that time, and then be picked up and brought back in for 2 weeks R&R. Whenever we went out, we usually I was gone up as long as 3 weeks. Was the longest time I was out on salvage, because we had to go up around Plate Coup, up in the mountains area, and it was a fair. Because a lot of times they couldn't drop us in right where the aircraft had landed or crashed, because it's in the middle of the jungle. We'd have to hike in, carry everything in.
This was part of your responsibility on that aircraft salvage, was to pick up the downed craft.
Yeah, if we could save it, we could get what we could, and destroy the rest, right there on the side.
With these aircraft, obviously, how would they be ruined accidentally?
Being shot down by snipers or guerrillas.
Was there any fear that the guy that came to get the aircraft would be shot down too?
Oh yeah, there was always that chance. And guerrillas. A couple of times we was in what they considered guerrilla-held territory. That the South Vietnamese Army had no control over that area at all. That it was the Viet Cong which was the guerrillas, it was the Viet Cong. It wasn't the hardcore North Vietnamese. They had not even got involved in the war at that time yet.
This was South Vietnam fighting among themselves at the moment then. When you were
Yeah, it was Viet Cong against
Army.
Army. Yeah, they was being supported by the North Vietnamese. I mean, the North Vietnamese was bringing down the supplies, but they weren't doing any of the fighting at that point.
This early in the war, and this is fascinating. Were we operating out of the fire bases and so forth at that time?
No.
How were we operating?
Basically, all we was there for was support and assistance as a logistical. You know, now we had our pilots would go out. If they supported the pocket of Viet Cong, you know, if it matter, we would go out there and use rockets. Stuff like that. Get them ground air support. Other than that, basically, we were there to support the people that were doing it at that time.
We immediately started out with good intentions.
Yeah. Started out with, the only sad thing out there is that I felt that, I still feel it was this. It was a winnable war if people back here in the higher echelons would have let the people who were in charge of it went like they need to. But you can't control a war in Washington, D.C. when it's 15,000 miles around the world. You've got to be there to see what happens from day to day. And so consequently, to satisfy the people back here, the people over there in Japan were hyping figures, everything else, and later on, in fact, there was a big speech about that.
That's when the battle time figures.
Yeah. I mean, the man was under tremendous pressure from here, was saying, well, you should be able to whip this war. They always said it, but they would never let Luther his long enough so he could do it the way he needed to. I always thought that was one reason Kennedy was assassinated, because there were rumors of a massive buildup getting ready to start to win that thing. And I think if Kennedy hadn't been assassinated before he had been re-elected, I think he would probably find that they had been all over that.
This is just
Personal speculation.
this isn't returning I got a better name or something. Is there any discussion about this among
Oh, yeah, about the June of July, a lot of us noticed that they were really stockpiling ammunition, weapons, and stuff, and more than the Vietnamese could ever use. So some, and the system coming in to compensate for all that ammunition and everything. And, how you are there. You get to put the same food over there. And of course, like I say, they didn't have to start an insect to eradicate there, because even at that time, it seemed like we were just sitting in the wind, we were, I felt at that time that the South Vietnamese was committed to it in that war. So, for some reason didn't have, most of them could care less. I know, but they could care less. The rural people, they were illiterate anyway, so they didn't really know what was going on, other than they knew that Viet Cong come in, raid the villages, put their young men away, and make them into Viet Congs, and steal their food, stuff like that. And then, of course, the South Vietnamese would come in at the same time. So, for them, one side was as bad as the other. I thought that's one thing I thought the states did try and do is, places like that, they would try and go in and rebuild the village, if it's been destroyed, and get people back in their homes, build new homes, or at least give them the money to
that was the other part of the problem. The money that the government sent over there never got down to the people where it was needed. It stayed up there in Denver. That was the other thing. The United States did build a lot of buildings. Saigon, you wouldn't believe in their buildings. You had compounds, the buildings that the Americans built and everything. You know, there's a forest period and so over at that time. And they would like self-fighting for themselves. Myself, but so they, you know, in that country it was like nothing.
This is all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's just, of course, the plan is
What about the plan?
terrible.
What
It's like living in a steam bath. You know, it's basically going to lose until I mean, it just poured down rain for 2-3 solid hours, and then suddenly the sun came out, and there was nothing but even now the time you couldn't tell the wind. Humid, hot, the insects everywhere. You could not sleep at night while on the field. I mean, they would literally eat you alive. I'm not talking about doing this to you, but I was taking that big one. Yeah, you could hear them coming. Yeah, I mean, you could literally hear them buzzing. Yeah. Of course, you had the snakes, all that other stuff. You had to contend with.
You ever seen a snake?
Oh, yeah. I had a buddy that died from what we called the temptation snake. There's no downs on them.
What is that? 10 faces snake?
We make them as temptation snakes. I don't know what the good name is for it. It's just little things.
What line?
About 18 inches, you know, about size of a thumb diameter. They attack the nervous system. And the reason we call it temptation snake is a hit you just probably walk about 10 paces before it would start activating. If you realize that you got hit, you get down and maybe snake will take it. So you start going in the convulsion, eventually you die because there's no laboratory, no answer for it.
Were you there when they were shooting?
Yeah, we was out in the field. These things were up in the trees. Okay, and bandage jungles and stuff, and they'd be laying up there along the side of the tree or something, and you or something goes by there, and they
That's pretty fast.
I've seen a lot of cobras, king cobras, mongooses. That's something like it, cobra and mongoose. Yeah, we used to love shooting cobras, you know, getting wild. Yeah, up in the mountains now, it wasn't too bad. Up around Texas, a lot. Up in that area, it was cool. But you get down the valleys and down along the aviation. So, a lot of sunshine. I mean, I was almost black from home from over there.
Did you guys get mortars or rockets or anything in your company area?
Our company area never hit. Now the compound, like I said earlier, the compound was hit once. We went out a lot of fishing there now a couple times, and I was off someplace else with it, but rocketed. So that was a special forces headquarters, or special forces. They were always trying to get into there because they didn't like them special forces there out there in the boom. The condos. You know, they just didn't take into it. There wasn't something saying equivalent to war at that time. On either side, it was really successful. They don't hold them long enough to beg you anyway.
Well, you know, I really can't put my finger, this is funny, Dick, I can't put my finger on what was going on in Vietnam at this time, really on.
I don't know how to answer you other than what I was doing.
You were picking up sound aircraft and Russian.
That had been damaged either in battle or pile of air.
Okay.
We found an aircraft that had been down at least 5 years.
American helicopter?
No, it wasn't a helicopter. It was a French aircraft. The body, what was left of it, was still inside of the cockpit. It looked like a military aircraft. But, 5 years in the jungle, you can't have a gun without anything. Well, we just stumbled across that one going to another one that we were looking for. A lot of times, all we had was a rough idea of it, was that, well, the last report we had of them was such and such coordinates. And we would have to, because you couldn't see it from up in the air because of the jungle foliage the way it was. So it goes back to that,
How would they drop you off in a trailer or something?
Try to get as close as possible if it could. I think the furthest we ever had the height was probably about 40 miles. And that was up in the mountains. So there was just no way we could get us to where it was at.
Did they keep resupplying it?
Yeah, we had rail contacts where we could have them drop in certain zones where we could try and do rendezvous. Normally, when we found it down, we got to the site, first thing we do would be clear the area around the aircraft so that if we just lift it out, it would get close out of there. When the chopper came to get us over the point.
What would you use to do that? Machetes?
Machetes, we had C4, which is plastic compound, plastic explosion, same like Play-Doh. You could mold it in any shape, form you wanted to. We'd use that to blow out the big trees, stuff like that. We had one guy that was a demolition expert, and he undertook that. He took care of that. Once we got everything squared away, then we did radio contact and then we come in and pick up what they could and pick us up too. So we'd always make a hopper on these for them after that fly, because there wasn't one close by.
This is obviously something that couldn't have gone on later in life.
I don't know if they did. I doubt it if they did. I mean, at that point in time, as hectic as things were going on there, especially in the late 60s, early 70s, I doubt if we even bothered with it. But you know how much equipment we left behind when we left it one day, and both alive.
So what was the reason? The economy, or was the thinking they were going to keep more clean, or was it to be also stuff balance, or what? I can't envision anything of a captain flying anything of a secret piece of equipment on a helicopter or a Huey or anywhere else. Now you've been on the sophisticated bomber or something like that to your point.
Well, I think
they thought the radio equipment was good by the time.
the aircraft had a box. Okay. Similar to aircraft, box box or they wanted to. There was one way down that could keep that how much, because they would report on the ground fire, that was one of the things, how much ground fire they were receiving and stuff. There was a couple of instruments that they were using over there, star scopes and stuff like that, for nighttime. So, but they did not want the enemy to be able to get their hands on it. And that was one of the reasons that we had to try and get the physical service engineering to go on the aircraft. Usually, most missions at least with 2 aircraft, if not 3 or 4. So they had a fairly good idea where the aircraft went down. The other thing is recover the body, because then bring them back to the family. They were pretty fortunate. I think there was only about 4 of them around that the pilots were killed. But you had a Vietnamese pilot and an American pilot. Or you had 2 American pilots in Canada. And of course they got 60. With a helicopter you can auto-rotate it down. The engine shot out and make it explode in the air. You can auto-rotate it down, so there's a pretty good chance if you walk away. With a lot of them doing that with the other thing, that they could tell us where we have to go get. And a lot of times those guys would bring that secret stuff out with them. If I wasn't in charge of that, I'd just be helping get whatever we could out of it. Instrument parts were very, at that time, they just started using really heavily, and there was a shortage of parts. So we had to salvage most of them too. I don't know how many rotor blades we salvaged, but by the time we got them back, before we barely got them onto the ground, they were folding and put on another copper, checking them out to make sure that they'd be okay to put on another copper, balancing them. I know one aircraft we brought back within 3 days. Yeah, that's like a back in the air. In 3 days. I didn't figure they'd get off the ground again, I looked at that, but with all the spare parts that they had here.
Can one helicopter pick up another one? Like,
Yeah.
can one here pick up another here?
Yeah. As long as you got the rotor blade and the mast off, you can lift it. Yeah, that's the kind of drives now. They got the big areas or something. The H-21 is what they normally use. That's what's called the workhorse. That's normally what they swing-load gears. You just pick up the gears and stuff. Those separate things. They could lift, I think they could lift tanks. No problem.
What rank were you by your time?
I was a PFC. I was going to use U4, but I thought my little trouble out there.
How about coming in this team?
We had squad, our platoon, we had a platoon running to 4 squads. Normally, we tend to one squad out on a mission. And they rotated the squad, so they squad going out. From time to time, it may be if there's an area where they felt that you might send 2 squads there. Depending on what they felt they needed to do. It got to the point later on, like I said, to begin with, we were allowed to carry a weapon, but we weren't allowed to carry ammunition. Okay.
That's because you were advising.
Right. We weren't active to the war. We were just very supportive. What was happening, we would be out there and some of the snipers would start shooting at us to get on. Ours was just to get behind us. Get behind our perimeter out there in the jungle. Well, we couldn't shoot because we had nothing to shoot with. We had the weapon, but we didn't have another ammunition for it. The lieutenant and one of the fellows in the squad would be responsible for carrying the ammunition. And at that point, the only way we could ever load our weapons was if our lives was in mortal jeopardy. I mean, the guy, you could shoot a guy standing there pointing his gun at him, and then you could load it and shoot him, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at that point in time. Then it came out where they would let us carry the ammunition on us, but we couldn't put it in the weapon. And it got to the point where we were able to put it in the weapon, but we couldn't have it out in the chamber. It got to a place where we there towards the latter part of the year, where activity was so intense. I mean, you know, you couldn't go off downtown to go to the garbage dump. You had to send an armed detail. And that was just right outside of town. About a mile and a half, 2 miles, where they had the big garbage dump. Because they would be trapping, or they'd sit there and up on it, because it was just down over in this big valley. They'd stay over on the other side of the valley, just like pot factories, if you had it. You know, like it's down there unloading trucks and stuff like that. So then at that point, you know, they finally, you know, if we were fired upon, we could fire back. Which did help me out a whole lot, you know.
Were you eating with their facilities or with your own?
We had our own on the compound. Of course, when we had ski riding and stuff like that. Now, I did get to, whenever I got a pass and we go to downtown there, I got the sample that we were getting Eugene and stuff like that. Which, some of the dishes are very good dishes, man. That's why they like dogs, you know, cats, they like all that good stuff. There's a lot of the dishes I was amazed, you know. You know, they got things over there that you don't dream of over here. You know. I can't tell you many different vegetable type things that they don't have around here. But along the seashore, there's a lot of food. Most of the commando rice and food. Because they are typical food. I'm just question about that. To this day, I don't like rice. I've done enough rice patties. I've jumped out into rice patties. You know, I don't want no part of rice. A lot of people can't understand it. I tell them if they seen how I was eating rice the way I seen rice, they wouldn't want to eat rice either. But
How long were you there?
I was supposed to be there until January of 64, and originally supposed to be 13 months. And they let me come back right after Christmas. They gave me an early batch. I don't even remember why now. Was about a month before you were due to get back. At that time, we went back to Saigon because of paperwork process and everything else. And when I come back on military mass. The worst way in the world to fly.
How would
Yeah, on the salvage run?
Yeah.
I would say probably about between 15 and 20.
Did you get flight pay?
Yes.
You did get flight pay?
And hazardous duty.
And hazardous duty. That's not bad.
No. Well, hazardous duty, I think was $8
A month?
$8 a month, and flight pay was, yeah.
Special forces, they do special pay also.
Yeah, oh, yeah, well, if I did what they did, I'd expect it to.
How would you describe being with them all the time? How would you describe to your grandchild what a special forces person was in Vietnam? What is special forces and what did they do?
To me, I think the special forces, special forces in these guys are also Rangers. I think they're the ultimate fighting machine. I mean, each man is individually trained in 2 different fields. You have the leg-man team. They can go out and live off the land. they're ultimate fighting machine. I mean, like, they know more ways to kill a human being than take his face off. They have to be probably the elite of the fighting military service. You know, there's something that's similar to the, I'm trying to think of the Navy equivalent. I can't think of that probably him. Well, I say QBs.
Commandos?
Commandos.
The Special Forces were the Green Berets.
Right.
And they were there all the time you were.
Right. And they're now my understanding was they were supposed to be. They were taking ARVN troops out into the jungle and teaching them how to fight guerrillas. The same way guerrillas are fighting them, you know. I mean, they go out and raid guerrilla outposts, you know. Because the guerrillas had every time had outposts, supply depots, you know, just like the South Vietnamese people who were government did, or the army did. And they was out there teaching them. And at the same time, you know, they did get into some fight situation. But, of course, at that time, like I say, they didn't take prisoners. Our people didn't. And I know it was a good time at the time. If they did, they didn't keep them for very long. They'd let them, you know, torture and kill them or whatever.
Who was the overall commander?
Westmoreland came over right after.
Was Eugene? Did he ever run State Navy?
I was trying to think who the ambassador was at that time too.
Was it Ellsworth Forces? Lodge?
Lodge.
Henry Cabot Lodge?
Henry Cabot Lodge.
Did you ever see him? Or?
No. I never seen him. I was only in Saigon 3 times the whole time I was over there. When I arrived, once I went there for an R&R, and then when I left.
You went to R&R at Saigon?
Well, it was part of it. I was going to Bangkok, but I had to fly to Saigon to get connecting flights. And I stayed there for a day or so, a couple of days, because I really hadn't seen the city.
Yeah.
And then from there I went to Bangkok for 3 days, and then I came back. And another time I took an R&R to Hong Kong.
So you did get to see both Bangkok and Hong Kong?
Yeah. Yeah, you did a month vacation, or a month leave. I took mine in 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that. Whenever they would let me, you know, take it.
Was casualty fairly light for the airline?
Yeah.
No, really fast.
63, yeah. Most of the casualties on the American side were pilots. Yeah, the grade ones on missile forces. And you heard about that from me back there at that time.
Are you amazed that this issue Royal Army, which is no longer thinking it's a pretty good one, with no air support, basically no heavy weapons, they're able to pick up on all kinds of stuff. At least they pushed the South Vietnamese nationals, the island. They pushed them around.
I can understand why they did that. The only ones that were trying to keep that country was the rich people. They wanted to make sure they separated. The rest of the people, like I say, they were, I don't think it took most of the army is made up of rural people and peasants. They didn't know what was going on. They just put the uniform in the gun and said, "Here, here's the way you shoot it," and put the atmosphere and said, "Okay, get to it." Us per se being pushed around, you have to admire the Ho Chi Minh elite group persistence and his people's persistence. I mean, they had a cause, and they fought for it. They fought for something they wanted. We didn't have a cause over there. You know, we were over there supporting a government that was the wrong government to begin with, but it was the only government available. I think that probably was the biggest downfall. I think it was a winnable war. If we had wanted to win it, we could have won it. It would have just taken. We might have lost a few more lives, probably billions of more dollars. It's pretty hard to fight a war that far away and keep it supplied. And of course, the thing that happened here in this country, you know, college students rioting and everything, that hurt the morale of the people there more than anything else.
Were you conscious of that when you were in winning the war?
Yeah. When I came home, a lot of people wasn't even aware of Vietnam yet at that point. Vietnam really, I don't think, started settling in until 66. What was it? July of 64, or early part of 65 when Johnson sent the Marines in to Nam.
Mm-hmm.
That's when, you know, I started hearing people talk about that here in this country. Of course, I was back here at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to extend my tour of duty over there by 6 months when I was over there, because if they would let you do that when you got back, you could get an early out. But the company commander, they just changed company commanders in my company. And the new one, he says, nah, he says, you served your time over here, go home. He says, why take a chance? He says, looks of it, he says, you've had enough chances. I said, okay, fine. You know, I went home. I was always kind of glad he sent me home, because I have always had the feeling if I stayed that extra 6 months, I might not have made it home.
Yeah.
I might have got drug up in there.
How much time did you have then?
Over there?
Well, you had 11 months then over there?
About 11 and a half, almost 12.
Okay.
Altogether, I got out about 13 days early. My 30 years was up. I got out on June 30th.
3 years ago. Yeah. What did you do when you came back?
Okay, when I left there, I came back to, I got a 2-week leave, went straight back home, which was a trip in itself. I never will forget it.
You came back on mass?
Came back on mass, Travis Air Force Base, and I had to catch a bus to get to,
Oakland?
San Francisco International, catch a United Airlines flight, supposedly to Fort Wayne. Got in Chicago, and they had one of the worst snowstorm blizzards that they'd had around here in January, right there, January 64, I think it was, first part of January. And ours was the last aircraft they allowed to land at O'Hara, and they closed the field. And like a dummy, of course, my folks, while I was up there, had moved up back over by the German church, St. Peter and Paul German Church up there, just inside the Wabash County line, about a mile. Well, in fact, it was right on the county line. I think that was 800. And instead of, they told me that they convert my plane ticket to Fort Wayne over to a train ticket. And instead of being smart enough to think about getting on the area like one and going to Huntington, where I wanted to go anyway, they stuck me out in the country, and I went into Fort Wayne. Well, of course, Fort Wayne was socked in, it snowed in anyway. I had to get over to the bus depot, and then I had to sit there and wait forever to get till a bus comes. It was about me in Huntington. And I hadn't even called the folks and told them I was en route. You know, I wanted to surprise them. big surprise. I got the surprise. But I got into Huntington about 6 o'clock in the morning. It was on a Saturday morning. And I called out to the house. Mom answered the phone. I woke him up. I said, I said, can you get to town to pick me up? What do you mean get to town to pick me? You know, and it registered. She recognized the voice. And, yeah, Mom, it's me. And she said, well, we're blocked in out here. There's snowdrifts all the way down to the highway. I said, oh, that's great. Here I am in Huntington, can't even get home. But, friend of Bud Fleck. I don't know if you know George Fleck. His boy Greg was killed over now. They farmed a farm where we was living. We lived on the Mary Palmer place right there. Bud was related to her, I think, aunt or something like that. And he got his tractor out and got down to the highway and then got a borrowed pickup and went to Huntington and got me that thing. But that was really interesting. I had 2 weeks home and then I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I was there till I got discharged. I was planning on making the service a career at that time. And when I got close to time to re-up, you know, it was offering me, you know, for 6 years, you know, $4,000 cash and E5, because I'd made E4 by then, and everything. And I said, well, that sounds good and everything. And then I found out that the company I was at the 244th quartermaster company down there. They were dismantling it and reorganizing it to send it to Nam. And of course, at that time, I kept tabs with what was happening over there. And I told the re-up guy, sergeant, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll take your package, and I'll go anywhere in the world except Nam. I said, I've been there, I don't want to go back. He said, well, I'm sorry. He says, your MOS is still critical. We need it over there. I said, sorry, Jose. I said, I'll go home. Because, you know, I couldn't see going back over there and risking my life again. Once was enough.
Tempting it again, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I know guys who's over there 2 or 3 different tours. Crazy. You know, well, if they don't want to do it, you know, but I figured if we'd been over there once, that was enough. They shouldn't send the guy back into that kind of a situation. Now, if it was an all-out war where we declared war, that's a whole different ballgame.
Everybody should have stayed.
Right, until it was over with, or whatever.
That was a crazy situation.
Even, you know, I mean, I talked to guys that was over there in the late 60s, or early 70s. You know, they said from the time they got there, they were counting the days till they get to go home. 12 months later. You know, that's ridiculous. You know, that you have to live under that kind of a situation. And of course, not many have made it.
Well, I've got some questions here. Were you ever exposed to Agent Orange?
Yeah. I think I have been. I filled out paperwork and everything else to that effect because they were spraying that stuff all over the countryside when I was over there.
Did you feel like your training was adequate before you got there?
The training I took in basic was nothing like you know, that training. That was a guerrilla warfare. What they trained us in basic was conventional warfare, and it wasn't for a tropical area, so to speak. You know, most of our wars we've ever fought, it's never been in tropical zones per se, except in the South Pacific in World War II. Europe wasn't, you know, there's flat countryside, and of course Japan, Korea. Now they did change that, even while I was over there, or while I was back here in the States. They were training in basic and stuff into jungle type tactics and stuff like this, how to fight a war in jungle and stuff. So they were trying to give our people the best training possible that they could. And most of that being trained was by Vietnam people or veterans from over there come back. That had actually lived through it, father's days was the ones that was training these guys.
And that's what you did back at Fort Campbell?
No, they had me stuck behind a desk. A boring job. I hated it.
They never took your experience, or?
Not at that time.
That's why I didn't.
Now, when they started reorganizing it and everything, they, I started, they started picking my mind about things over there and everything else. I always thought that was a little late in the game, because that was only about 60 days before I was due to get out.
Too late then.
Yeah.
Any blacks in your outfit?
Oh, yeah.
What was the relationship between the blacks and the whites?
Most of them I got along with. There was a few that were, anti anything, but the majority of them, we got along fine. Of course, the Army was pretty strict about that. They didn't allow segregation or any kind of prejudice going on, not openly anyway. And I ran into very little behind the doors prejudice. In fact, at Fort Campbell, there was probably more blacks than there were whites in my company. And over in Nam, it was just about, well, in my platoon anyway, it was just about 50-50. And I think that was basically the way it was most of the time over there. And I understand later on it got a little bit more lopsided, but I don't see how. All the pictures I ever seen, I've seen probably more white guys than I did black, unless they didn't take pictures of black guys. I don't know.
Was the drug scene?
Scratch that last statement. That sounds bad.
Was the drug scene on then or
No.
nothing?
There was no drugs whatsoever I know of except alcohol.
In Vietnam?
In Vietnam at that time.
No marijuana, no cocaine, hashish, nothing.
No.
Alcohol.
At least I never was exposed to it anyway.
Yeah, you'd see it as enlisted men, I'm sure. You belong to any veterans organizations now?
Not right this moment I belong to the VFW and the American Legion.
Yeah.
I kind of let my membership lapse. I get my job and everything. The shifts I work in all, it's kind of hard for me to be able to attend meetings and stuff like that. I, along with one of the professors up here at the college, Dr. Zimmerman, and another Vietnam veteran, we were trying to get a counseling kind of a group together up there around Manchester area for the veterans and everything, but with the vet center up in Fort Wayne, I never quite got off the ground. They seem to be doing a pretty good job up there.
Did you feel like you needed any counseling or help or anything when you got back?
To this day, there's a lot of things that bother me that I don't want to talk about. Things that I did, things that I've seen, that it's hard for me to cope with. I still have nightmares time to time. I really wasn't able to talk to Dad or Mom or my brothers or anybody because you almost have to be. You have to know where the guy is coming from to begin with, to be able to talk about that stuff over there. And it almost has to be somebody that was there too. I know I was a completely different individual when I come home. I wasn't the same one that left.
How old were you when you got home?
21. And then when I was 18, 21 when I came home. I grew up probably about 20 years, for 11 months or 12 months I was over there. In fact, my mother made the statement that she sent him a wholesome American boy and they sent her back home a killer. I think that was the hardest thing for me to accept. My own mother saying that, you know. It was a growing experience. Some of the things I regret that I had to experience, other things I'm glad I did. I think it's helped me be able to cope with things in my everyday life better than what I used to. But like I say, I still have flashbacks from time to time. You know, usually it's a nightmare. You know, my wife always tell when I had a nightmare, I just stretch her all over the bed and wake her up. I start speaking Vietnamese, and yelling and everything else, and I don't even aware of it. You know, it's not as bad now since I've been able to start talking about it, and that's only been the last 4 or 5 years that I really felt like I was wanted to talk about it. There for the longest time, I almost hid the fact that I was a Vietnam veteran because of the feeling in the country and everything. And that probably bothered me more than anything else. You know, that my own countrymen would feel that way about me just because I had served over there.
That is strange. I don't know why. That's strange. And I hear this from all of them. Same story.
You know, I can't. I guess I can't explain it in my own mind either. It was frustrating. Of course, we lost a war. We've never done that before. And there was a lot of. I'd talked to other veterans from Korean War, World War II. You know, and I felt like they was almost embarrassed by the fact that we'd lost that war. You know, that, well, hey, we went to war and we won ours. What's the matter with you guys? You're letting us down, you know. You know, I told them, I remember telling this one guy, and this was when I was still in the service, you know, and he was a antique, you know, he was an old veteran. He'd been 25 years or something like that. And I said, hey, if you think you can do a better damn job of it, you get your ass back over where it's wrong. You go over there and fight it. See how easy it is. Then you come back and tell me. I said, it isn't like when you was in there where they was putting you out there and giving you everything you needed and away you went. I says, over there, you didn't, one day or the next, you don't know what you're going to be doing. You know,
I never, in talking to all of you, I have never understood how or why they conducted the war like they did, and why didn't they go on some kind of front and just gradually, it didn't seem like they wanted to work that way. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't. Obviously they couldn't.
Well, I don't know if they couldn't. Like there again, the war was being fought in Washington, D.C. It wasn't being fought in Nam, it was being fought here. You know, the cabinet members and all that, they were the ones making the decisions on how the war was going to be handled over there, and they weren't over there. The generals and everything else over there was saying, hey, we need this to win the war over there. No, we want you to do it this way. You know, I mean, if you don't, you know, you put a guy in charge of something, and you got to give him the faith to do the job right.
That's true.
You know?
Have you seen the memorial in Washington, D.C.?
No. I would like to someday. I intend to go there someday. I don't know when that will be, but before I die, I will get there.
They say it's
what pictures I've seen of it, I like it. I'm glad that the veterans who died over there was honored. Okay. I understand now that there's a statue been erected with 3 figures near that is supposed to simplify the living veterans, if I'm understanding it right.
I assume that, yeah.
that's all fine and good. But if, my personal opinion is if the government and the American people feel that they owe something to Vietnam veterans, let's give them something that they can use. Okay?
Right.
Like there's some veterans out there that need good job training. Okay? We have veterans out there who have been exposed to Agent Orange. Let the government be accountable for that. They knew what they was putting out over there. They ain't kidding nobody. And as well as the drug companies did, because they settled out of court for $180 million or whatever it is, which is peanuts compared to what it's going to cost. I'm almost sure my one daughter had birth defects, when she's little. Everything was due to that, because we'd never had anything like that in our family history in the last three generations. Both of them have poor eyesight, and that's one of the things from Agent Orange.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
So that's one thing. Give us the veterans that wasn't able to come back. I didn't want to go to college when I come back.
No.
I had no inclination at that point in time. Okay. A lot of my benefits ran out before I got my act together, so to speak, mentally and whatever, to really realize, hey, what do I need to do to get my future settled in? Okay, it was too late then, because all of the times had lapsed. Give us veterans that back. Sure, it's going to cost some money, but if they want to do something for the veterans, that's for it. The veterans who had, the only deprogramming I had to come back from over there was when they went through with all this stuff on this secrecy shit. That was it. They didn't, one day I was over there, 2 days later I was in the United States. 4 days later I was home, sitting in my living room.
Yeah.
4 days from the time I left that country, I was at home, sitting in my living room.
That is hard to believe.
What? There was no cooling down period or transition period, nothing. And they was doing that to the GIs from the time I was over there until they brought them home. They'd be on the plane one day, and the next day they'd be on U.S. territory, terra firma. They couldn't go. They were still tuned in over what's happening over there. That was probably the funniest thing for me. Of course, I went from cold weather here to hot weather over there, and I went from hot weather back to cold weather here. And that to boot, one day I'm not knowing where I'm going to live or die, and the next day I'm back here on good old safe ground, wondering how the hell I got back here. Am I ready for this? That was the strangest thing. And of course, a lot of the guys I've talked to since then, they said that's probably the hardest thing for them to cope with. Boom, boom. Pull you out of the jungle, you'd be fighting your butt off that day, and the next day you'd be home.
That seems strange, really.
You're supposed to go from instant soldier to instant civilian, and it don't work that way. And of course, I'm pretty sure I killed people over there. I know of one. I seen him. I seen him fall from my shot. That puts a whole new perspective on your mind. I was raised I was raised a Christian, thou shalt not kill, but love, honor, and obey your country. And I would do that again if my country called and asked me to. In an act of war. It'd have to be a war the next time. Just to go play games, forget it. But if it's a war, I'd go again. Now they probably wouldn't take me now, because I'm too old and overweight and everything else. But I look at things a whole lot differently than I ever would have dreamed I would have at this point in time. And even to this day, I don't plan too far in the future. No. Well, it's just, I just don't feel comfortable doing it. You know, I can look down the road a year from now. Okay. Try and look down the road 10 years from now. I ain't worried about 10 years from now. If I get to the end of that year, fine, then I'll worry about that next year. Okay? But why sit here and try and figure out when it'll be 10 years from now? Because I got to get this year out of the road first. You know, and so much can happen in this year that will have more effect on what happens in that 10 years.
Do you think that Vietnam has caused this change in your thinking? Or?
Oh yeah, I'm sure, because over there, yeah, it was from day to day. You know, we'd go out and get drunk every night that we was back on compound. You know, at the end of the day, we'd go get drunk. Well, that may be the last drunk we'll ever have, you know, let's really fling, you know. And that's what it kind of was over there, was day-to-day existence. It wasn't living, per se, it was existence.
Was alcohol a problem when you got back?
Yeah. It wasn't near as readily available back here as it was over there, because we could buy civilian beer over there, which was beer liver and bombing bar, which they put formaldehyde and that stuff. You know, I mean, one bottle could knock you. Or you could drink a case and a half, you never knew.
Yeah.
But back here, all you get on base and until you was 21 was 3.2. So it, for a while, I had a little bit of a problem. Well, it took me probably 2 or 3 months to. The nice thing about that was I was back here, and as soon as I went back down to Fort Campbell from leave at home, within 2 weeks, that company I was assigned to was going to the Mojave Desert to play war games for 3 months. And they put me on the advanced team, going out there getting everything set up for it. So I was out in the desert for 3 months, you know, so that helped drive me out more than anything else, because we weren't able to go into the civilian towns and everything out there as easily as we could when I was over in Nunham. And of course, while I was home, I tried to not let Mom and Dad know that their son was on his road to being an alcoholic. I don't know if I was ever an alcoholic, but I sure did like drinking beer.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was times that it got to be a little bit of a problem. You know, I mean, I gotta get me a drink, man. I need a drink. That's all there is to it.
Did your parents were not drinkers then at all?
Oh yeah, they were, but you know, me being underage, you know, they said they didn't mind if I drank if I was legal or if I was at home, you know, but they didn't want me out partying and drinking. Of course, being in the service and everything, there wasn't a whole lot they could tell me, even when I was home, you know, because like Dad said, you know, well, you're in the service, you're your own man now, you know, you have to live by your own actions.
Did you smoke too?
Yeah.
Still smoke?
Well, I quit. I smoked while I was over in Nam, and I think that was more nerves than anything else. And then I come back to the States and I quit. And I didn't smoke for probably 10, 12 years. And then, about 5 years ago, I guess it was, that's really when I started working a lot of this frustration and everything out. And I started, somebody offered me a cigarette one day. I was in a real mood. Offered me a cigarette, and I sat there and I started smoking. Next thing you know, I bought me a pack of cigarettes. And
you were off the road.
I quit about a year and a half ago, and I quit for about 9 months. I started putting the weight on his dad. It wasn't fun. I said, I'd rather die of cancer than die of a heart attack. Now, I hope to quit both eventually, but I don't know if I will or not.
I find that this is really an extremely interesting series. You know, every single person has been different. Really has. And
Well,
I appreciate it.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
Everybody, regardless if they're there at the same time or at a different time, the different, you know, I can talk to a guy that was there in 68, talk to a guy 70. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of things that the frustration stuff they felt that I felt.
Yeah.
But yet, there's things that I can't relate to that they're relating to.
Mm-hmm.
But I have an idea of what it's like. And a lot of people are shocked when I say, when was you over? 63. 63? Well, the thing didn't start until 67. And I said, wrong. I said, we had American troops over there in 54. And they're utterly astounded. But I was interested in, like I say, I've seen your article in the paper about this, and I think this is about the only place I've ever heard of them doing this.
I don't know. I think
know.
we're unique. I think the library is unique in that we have the facilities and they want to do it. Because it's not for you or for me, it's going to be 50 or 100 years from now. Some guy's going to say, hey, what did happen there? You know, what was the story? You won't write it down.
No.
Yeah.
Unless somebody does, it'll never be put down. What did I start saying? The other thing, and I don't know if, I think I mentioned it prior to 1963, or were we there in the same time as I was in 63. But I'd be willing to bet that I was probably one of the first ones from Wabash County, since I was a county resident at the time I was inducted and I went to school and graduated, that went over to Vietnam.
I wouldn't be surprised if you had. You never said that.
I don't know if there's any way that anybody could check down the records. I don't know how you even go about checking it out, you know.
I think you're going to put on thing. Roger Panning would be the other one that would be closest. You know Roger? I'll have to check these sometime. Well, I think we'll close the interview, and it's an opportunity for me to thank you for taking leave out of your day off. No,
Day
day
off?
off. And,
First of 4 days off,
yeah, and I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to doing it, and Wabash County Public Library Oral History Program.